Hey, Faith Unfiltered podcast listeners. This is Blake Smith, back with another half of the new panel for the Brewed Awakenings series here at Faith Unfiltered podcast. The Brewed Awakenings series, if you heard the first series, the first episode of this, you'll know that it comes as a part of our rebranding to Faith Unfiltered. We know that when faith and religion intersect with real life experience, the resulting conversations can be difficult. Because of that, the church has too often avoided the conversations altogether. But we know not talking about important things doesn't make those things go away. If anything, avoidance can make things worse. So, voila, we have the Brewed Awakening series, and it's been created to bring those conversations to the table. This panel that we've put together for this part of the Brewed Awakening series will be mixing and matching their insights for some real, raw conversations about subjects that matter and make a difference. As I mentioned in the first intro episode as well, they've all come to the table with a mixture of passions for social justice. And today I am here with the other three panel members for Brewed Awakenings. They are Nick Keehler, Mary Cusack, and Linda Stanbridge. I am so excited to have you guys with us, and I'm so excited to get this kicked off. I want to start by just letting you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What are you doing now? Whatever you want to share so that they can get to know who they're going to be listening to.
Well, I'm looking at my friends here on the panel. We're trying to decide who's going to be the extrovert that goes first. And I'm usually willing to be a volunteer to jump in and trip over words. So my name's Linda Stanbridge. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Michigan, and I serve as the Michigan Mission Center president. And really excited to be here and share with my friends here. I'm a mom of two girls. They're 8 and 11. And I have a dog, Pepper, who will probably bark and offer her feedback here and there. And also have more cats that I'm willing to admit on a recording. But that's me.
Thanks, Linda.
I will go second. I'm Nick. If Linda's the extrovert, I'm going to play the introvert who's on the constant journey to find voice and take up space, because that's important to do as a community. So yeah, my name's Nick. I currently live in Parkville, Missouri, which is just outside of Kansas City, Missouri, with my partner Reagan and my dog Nugget, who again may pop in and out depending on where we are recording on any given day. I volunteer on a number of teams in the Community of Christ, and professionally, I'm currently working as a social justice minister in a peace and justice office for a community of Catholic women religious in Leavenworth, Kansas. So lots of sustainability stuff, lots of visioning stuff, and lots of hands-on systemic change work. It's a really big job, but it's my passion and calling, I suppose.
Right.
So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Cool.
Thanks, Nick and Linda. I'm Mary Cusack. I am a retired school psychologist. I live in New York State right now in a little place called Greenwood Lake. But I come from Brooklyn, which you'll be able to ascertain after you listen to me for about a minute. I'm married. My wife, Miriam, and I have been together for 20 years. I have a few stepdaughters. I have grandchildren. It's interesting that Nick talked about working with women religious from the Catholic Church. I was a crib Catholic, I guess they call it. Pretty devout my whole life, but I was also lesbian. So there was a conflict there. But I came to Community of Christ a few years ago, and I just graduated from seminary. It was like a lifelong dream I had to study scripture. So right now I'm kind of in my local, well, not local, but I'm in my congregation, and I'm working on sort of reaching out to LGBTQ people at Pride events to tell them about Community of Christ. And that's it for me.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh, congrats on finishing seminary. That's such a big deal. That is awesome.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I thought about you a lot during December and I enjoyed seminary, but I was so thankful to be done and get to read a book for fun, something that wasn't assigned that I had like a week to finish or whatever. So I get that.
Yeah.
Well, as you guys can hear, we have some great personalities that are joining us here for these panel discussions that'll be taking place over the next months. And I am, as I said before, really excited. I guess one of the things that we'll see through this podcast series is if pets are all about social justice. If we get them riled up and they start sharing with us, that's okay too. So.
That's
Well,
right.
what I want to do now, thank you guys for those introductions. Now, I want to let our listeners hear a little bit about your story. So, obviously, you said yes to be a part of a panel to take up some difficult topics and to just sit around the table with colleagues and share those thoughts. So, I would like to know, and for our listeners to know, what is it that brought you to this place in your life, your passion for social justice, maybe what are some of those areas of passion, and what brought you to the yes to be a part of the panel?
I'll jump in first. I finished off, and so I guess we're all taking turns. So I'm going to push myself forward. So I had sort of touched on this. I grew up as a Catholic. My parents were devout, and but not in any kind of phony way. They were really authentically connected to God, even with all the problems. They were, and I could see that, and it influenced me. And we went to church all the time, and I found most of what I experienced in the church to be really beautiful. And I fell in love with Christ in the Catholic Church. I loved the music. I loved everything about it. I loved the candles and the incense and the statues, all of the trappings that went with it. I really was very inspired by. And I think some of it was in me too, because like as a kid, I wanted to, instead of getting books to read, I wanted to get books to read about Jesus or about the disciple. I was always drawn to that. So as I grew up, though, and became more and more aware of my sexuality, of liking girls, it became very disturbing to me to believe that and also I'm 66. So we're talking, I was in the 60s having these awarenesses and just thinking, my God, just who I am as a sinner, it's offensive to God. It was very painful to me. And of course, I kept it all secret, and I tried very hard to blend in with the straight community, and I almost did. I got a boyfriend. I really cared about him. I went to church. I could have been a real good Catholic, girl if I had not been blessed with being LGBTQ. I would have been a very provincial Brooklyn Catholic girl. So what finally happened was I started to drink, and I became self-hurting, and I got sober at about 23 years old in 1982. And I thought, oh, I can't keep hurting myself. I have to learn to accept myself somehow. So I went to therapy and the meetings and everything, and I got sober. And then I came out, and I started to be influenced and introduced to the LGBTQ community in Manhattan. But I found that community had issues with me as well, because I wanted to continue to be Christian and to be Catholic. I found good Catholic people out there. And I did have support, but they were small groups. So I had to find just the right priests or nuns or whatever that were progressive and accepting. Even parishes, some of them would accept you. You just, and I look, stereotypically gay. So I can't just walk into any parish, and I have tattoos and everything. And so anyway, what finally happened, I'm going to skip up to now. I went to a parish where I'm living now that's pretty conservative, but the priest knew that I was LGBTQ. He accepted me. But one Sunday after the homily, which is the sermon for the Catholics, he asked people to support a bill of conscientious objection for medical people to refuse to participate in gender affirming surgeries. And I was just so taken aback. I had a conversation with him and said, this is going to really hurt people. People hurt themselves over these issues. So I finally, after years, left the church. And I wasn't looking for another church at all. And all I ever really wanted was to find a seat at the pew where I could be quiet and nobody would bother me and I wouldn't bother anybody else. I just wanted to. So I thought, okay, maybe it's just me pursuing my relationship with God personally. But I loved theology. As I had said earlier, I love theology. I love reading theology. I found a show. It was actually recommended on YouTube to me from the other shows I watched, which was a theology program from Center Place that was led by John Hamer from Community of Christ. So I started watching this and I thought, who is this man? I looked him up. I found out that he was LGBTQ, that he was a pastor in a church. I thought, what church is this? And then I did more due diligence and I found out about Community of Christ. I started to write emails and I really wasn't looking for a church at all. It wasn't on my agenda at all. So anyway, I found about Community of Christ and about how they believe in the worth of all people and they believe everybody is called. Then I found out they ordain LGBTQ people and I found out they marry us. I mean, I got married in a Protestant church because I sang in a gospel choir. It was and they did it, but the minister said to me, just know I could be defrocked for this. And they wouldn't call it a marriage ceremony. They called it a blessing of our union. But our church marries people. I couldn't believe what I found. So I started coming to the church. I don't want to go on too long, but I'll just add this. My wife, it turns out, had grown up LDS, but she left and had issues. Half of her family is, and I couldn't believe, we had roots there at one time, the first 14 years. And my wife was a little kind of I hope this is not, a sect or something. Anyway, I came in. I never influenced my wife. She was not Christian. She always liked Jesus. My wife is also converted to the church. It had little to do with me, just in the fact that I was there. She herself found Community of Christ and felt a connection that binded her back to things that she loved about her church that took her to another place. So my passion right now, to end, is to really, I've been inspired to go out and tell other LGBTQ people, particularly Christians who, like me, want a connection, that we're here, that we're out here and what we're about and what we do. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's my story.
Wow, Mary, thank you so much for that. What a great story. And I am sure that we will continue to hear bits and pieces of that as you share in this panel because, wow, what a journey. All right, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I don't mind going. Mary, I'm excited to hear that you are a convert because I am also a convert. And I always just enjoy hearing, kind of a little bit of my experience through someone else's lens. So thanks so much for sharing your story. My conversion story is a little bit different, and I'll try to be short about it. But I came to Community of Christ in the mid to late 90s. And I went to high school with a bunch of kids who were at that time were RLDS. And back then they had I don't know if it was Friday nights or Saturday nights, but they had a youth group that would meet at one of the churches. I grew up in the Flint, Michigan area. And that was, my first introduction to the church, and then went to youth camps and kind of had this sort of slowly increasing experience with the church. So I snuck in, not too long before the name change, because I remember my congregation going through that experience of the name change, and kind of as an outsider, just, watching how different people processed that. But I was raised in the Pentecostal church, which is, if listeners are not familiar, it's a pretty conservative evangelical Christian church. And I actually went to Christian school when I was in elementary school. So I had kind of a really intense experience in private school for that. As I got older, I think I had sort of a similar experience with Mary where, you start to learn things about yourself and other people. And I think especially, when you're teens, as you get exposed to like a broader group of people, some of the things that I was taught didn't really fit with what I was experiencing of the world. And it was causing me to have a lot of questions. And, having been in the evangelical world, questions are not always a popular thing because sometimes that's perceived as doubt, which can be a really difficult place to be. Because I think in a way it can be viewed by some people as sort of a choice. And so I thought I had this like sort of a dirty secret about myself, which was that I had all of these, like deep, dark questions. I didn't experience that when it came to Community of Christ, or again, it was RLDS at the time. People were really open, and I appreciated how, and this is something that's, as a parent, I try to kind of keep in the front of myself. I didn't feel like people were as concerned with giving me an answer, a one specific answer, but I could get a different answer from different people. And it was acceptable. People might in the same space offer different answers and disagree with each other kind of openly. And it was like sort of a mind-blowing thing to me to watch people in a way wrestle with what they thought and what they felt about a church. And so it was, I loved it. I fell in love with my home congregation was Bristolwood, if anybody's listening, and a really wonderful place. So I decided to go to Graceland and then later went to seminary. And I ended up in seminary and I graduated right before COVID started. So I was really like in a very theological mindset while processing, this kind of like massive corporate trauma. And so I'm really thankful that I had sort of that framework that got me through. And the relationships too that I made at seminary, I think were really, really kind of life changing for me. But I think the main thing that seminary taught me, or that the faith perspective the progress that I made there was really, this is something that Tony Schwab-Smith helped me with, was really to understand that the questions that I had or what I perceived as my doubt was to kind of reframe that as wonder. And a way to think about that as really a form of worship. And so for me, it was like this total just kind of awakening and an opportunity to re-meet God because I didn't feel like I had this deep, dark, dirty secret, which was that I had doubts and questions. I decided then to do seminary again, and I went and did my doctorate of ministry at Ecumenical Theological Seminary, which is in Detroit, and ETS talks about itself as being rooted in the Detroit prophetic tradition. And that really grabbed me when I started looking at schools because I'm like, this sounds like Community of Christ, right? They're using the same lingo. We talk about ourselves as being a prophetic people. And I really wanted to understand from like, it's a predominantly Black seminary, like what would it mean to be prophetic from the experience of people who have been so rooted in that tradition for so long and then have had like such successes, high points and low points and just the progress that the Black faith movement in churches in Detroit and across the U.S. have had, and I just really wanted to like sit and learn in that space, and it helped me to try to really understand more about what does like social justice mean for a Community of Christ. And I think what drew me to this podcast, to make this whole long story about something, what drew me to the idea of this podcast is the more I've explored my own questions, things I thought were doubts that were really wonders, the more time I've spent thinking about the prophets. What does it mean to be a Community of Christ? What does it mean to be a prophetic people? Like, I'm just so convinced that the church needs to have a voice about what's happening in the world around us, and that these conversations, that I was privy to when I was young, these disagreements, even if they're gentle, that it's so important for us to just kind of consider the world that we're, living in through this lens of our faith. And I think those conversations and that way of, wrestling with the world theologically and spiritually is just best done in a group. So I'm really drawn to the idea to be able to sit with other people who are willing to really think deeply about what you think, feel, and believe, and to be willing to move by each other. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Linda. I really appreciate it. One of the things that stood out for me that you were talking about and is so real about Community of Christ is that this asking question and getting a different answer from different people, which is, I think, part of the beauty of our tradition. and hopefully a message to our listeners that you don't have to have a particular way of thinking about these things. We hope that you'll join us in these conversations, and it'll help you think, and you'll share your ideas with us as we go forward. That's what really will make a difference, is if we can have these conversations and do it in ways that are productive and not demeaning and diminishing. That's kind of the way our world has gotten, is we talk down at each other. And so just to have a group like this that can come together and expect, maybe there will be some disagreement, but in the end, we're all looking toward the same end. So thanks for that, Linda. All right, Nick, you're on.
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing your stories. It's really exciting to hear conversion stories. I am not a convert. I was born in the community of Christ. So it's really exciting for me to hear those perspectives. Yeah, I was born and brought up in the community of Christ church. I think I always kind of trace my theological journey back to me kind of being a bit of a bummer kid. I was always thinking and wondering about like my place in the universe, the meaning of existence, and I'm 11 and I should not be thinking about these dumb things. And in this process, I grew up going to junior camp and middle school camp and senior high camp and reunions, and I went to church like nearly every Sunday, and there was this profound sense of meaning and like a extended family that I found in the church. So it made me in questioning all these things kind of lean into, well, maybe this church has some answers. Let's try and find them. And you grow up and you're going to church and you're not questioning much about it. You don't know what it's about. It's just the place you've always been going. So of course I'm going to ask the questions there, right? So I go into Sunday school and I'm asking all these questions, and the Sunday school teachers and my peers are like dialoguing with me on that. And then, would go into Sunday morning church, and then I would probably leave most of the time and go and play around in the creek behind the church when I was a kid. So all that to say, I had a really, really normal and traditional upbringing until I was 18. I went to Graceland University to do my undergrad, a very COC experience. And then I continued asking a lot of questions there. Probably a lot of people talk about Tony as like a scary professor who grades hard. I feel like I annoyed him mostly because I was always coming in and saying like, Tony, this is all great. I love what you're teaching. Can you tell me actually like the 5 theories that you just talked about with the Christ and the salvation stuff? And he would do it for me, and then I would still walk away feeling like, okay, that's still a lot more questions I have now than I have answered. So I did World Service Corps as well. I went to Dunfield House in England as part of my continuing, growth into discipleship. I had this sense really early on that in college that, cool, if I'm going to be a religion major in this small liberal arts college, what does that mean for my discipleship, right? I had this feeling real early on that it means I can either use religion as something that I can lean on and bolsters me and gives my life, some sense of purpose without much thinking about it, or it can be this process of co-creation with God and partnership with God, and trying to like actually build up the world that the community of Christ continues to profess. I say I like hearing conversion stories because the most conversion story I ever had was saying, is this actually what I believe? Like as a 17-year-old kid, like leaning into church, is this what I believe? Is this kind of sketchy? And amongst all the rockiness that we all kind of experienced during that time, I found myself really lucky to be in this church because the values that we could always come back to, the enduring principles that we could always come back to, no matter where people were like, right, giving the different answers, arguing, having very faithful disagreements, there was always this greater vision of we're here trying to do our best, do what we can. We will admit when we don't have the answers, and we will admit when this is maybe an answer that is unanswerable. So I said, really, I'll stick with this church because they allow me, right, to mess around and find out. They allow me to ask these questions. So that was yeah. Then when I went into seminary, I graduated seminary a few years ago. A lot of what I did my work on was or spent my time working on was saying, cool, worship is great. That's all well and good. But I was the kid who left church and went and played in the creek. I didn't listen to this stuff. I went out and I experienced God in the trees. I experienced God in the random deer that I, come across sleeping and I freak out. So what does that mean for like ecclesiology? What does that mean for the nature of the church? And that's kind of what drew me into social justice. And I hope I'm connecting all these dots well enough, but that's what drew me into social justice was if I'm finding God not in the professed doctrine, not in the worship services, but I'm finding God in like my connection and spirituality with nature, yet look at all the stuff humanity is doing to mess up this beautiful gift we've been given and this life-sustaining food and water and air we've been given. That was my entrance point into social justice, and that was my entrance point into saying the church has something to say about this, but we spend so much time focusing on coming together every Sunday and leaving, and then it kind of just grew from there. So a lot of my seminary work was focused around yelling about we need more entry points, we need more ways for discipleship to take place. And then, the environmentalism grew into a passion for anti-racism work, a passion for land justice work, and more and more and more, because it's all one big woven web of interconnected things. And I think that the church articulates a really, really powerful vision for that. And that I think that's a really powerful vision that's needed for this current era in United States, particularly history.
Yeah.
We're looking for alternatives, and that is why I'm excited to be on this podcast. I'm really excited to dialogue with you all about these crazy things that are going on. And I got into theology to offer more faithful, more responsible interpretations of the world we're trying to create. So that's where I'll leave it.
Wow. Thanks, Nick. There's so many things there that, first of all, I just want to say I'm excited to meet another lifelong Community of Christ member that is passionate and not here just taking for granted the journey of faith. A lot of people stay in a tradition for generations because it's what their family did and it's just what they know and it's easier. But to have come to a point where you're asking the tough questions, it's really similar to my journey. I think I was brought up in an era and in a location in the church where I just did that because that's what everybody around me did, and had to get to a point in my life where I could make the faith my own because I was asking the tough questions. So I think that speaks volumes to a lot of people. The other piece is just representing that huge community that find God in so many places other than a church building. So, gosh, I'm just even more, after hearing you guys tell your stories, I'm just even more excited about what can take place in these conversations and hopefully create a space for a variety of people to also find a place at the table. We in Faith Unfiltered and especially in Brewed Awakenings are hoping that we can touch the lives of others who might not be, they might not even be Christian. They might not consider themselves faithful, or they may consider themselves atheists. As a matter of fact, one of our upcoming series for Brewed Awakenings will include conversations between an apostle and an atheist that are going to have some regular conversations. We're just trying to create space. So if you are one of our regular listeners here at Faith Unfiltered Podcasts, we hope that you will share this information with people that you encounter who are struggling with their journey, who don't even think they're on a journey, whatever it is. We invite them to the table because this is the way we can begin to live into the call to be prophetic people and have those conversations. I hope you, our listeners, have also heard both in this conversation with Linda and Nick and Mary, but also in our previous conversation with our other three panelists, that these are folks who have they've not just studied and talk about it, but they are living it. And that's really important for all us to hear, and to hear that being a part of it and living it isn't beyond any of our capability. We think that's tough. It's dangerous. It's hard. People won't like us. But we find, I have found just in the last several months in some events that I've been participating in, actually finding companions on the journey. So I think the more we talk about it, the more folks will feel comfortable being able to talk about it. So I want to thank you guys, Linda, Nick, Mary. Oh my gosh, I again am even more excited than I was an hour ago before we sat down, and I remember why we wanted to do this. So thank you guys for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Blake.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I can't
Yeah.
wait till we get these kicked off and get these conversations going. And to you, our listeners here at Faith Unfiltered Podcast, you've been listening to an episode from our new series, Brewed Awakenings, and we hope that you will join us more in the future. And even for some of the other content that we've been producing for a number of years now. Either way, we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. We invite you to join us again. Until then, go out and, as my co-leader would say, go out and make the world a better place. Don't just talk about it. Do something. Take care.